Athena, virgin goddess of wisdom and war. Her birth, legends, and legacy. A journey through ancient wisdom. Let your breathing slow, gentle, and natural. Feel the weight of your body settling deeper into comfort, into safety, into this moment of calm. Tonight, we embark on a journey not across seas or mountains, but into the realm of wisdom itself, into the story of a goddess who sprang, fully formed from the mind of the greatest god, wearing armor and wielding knowledge as her weapon. Athena, the gray-eyed goddess, patron of Athens, protector of heroes, mistress of crafts, strategist supreme. She was never a child, never uncertain, never unarmed. From the moment of her impossible birth, she was complete, wise beyond the wisdom of all other gods, courageous beyond the courage of the bravest warriors. She is the goddess of the olive tree and the owl, of the loom and the spear, of reason and righteous war. Tonight we'll explore her miraculous birth, her legendary contests, her guidance of the greatest heroes, and her enduring legacy that shapes our understanding of wisdom and strategy, even now. So settle deeper, let your mind open to the ancient stories, and prepare to meet the virgin goddess who combined the power of war with the clarity of wisdom, who stood beside heroes in their darkest hours, who built civilizations through her gifts. The story of Athena is the story of intellect triumphant, of strategy over brute force, of civilization over chaos, and it begins with a headache that would split the heavens themselves. The virgin goddess of wisdom and war. Before we dive into the myths and stories that made Athena one of the most revered deities in ancient Greece, we need to understand something fundamental about her character, something that made her unlike any other god or goddess in the Greek pantheon. Athena embodied a paradox that the ancient Greeks found not contradictory but perfectly harmonious. She was simultaneously the goddess of wisdom and the goddess of war. Now, this might seem strange at first. We tend to think of wisdom as contemplative, peaceful, scholarly, and war as violent, chaotic, destructive. How could one deity represent both? But the ancient Greeks understood something profound. There are different kinds of war, just as there are different kinds of wisdom, and Athena represented the best of both. In Greek mythology, there was already a god of war, Ares, Athena's half-brother, the son of Zeus and Hera. Ares represented everything brutal and chaotic about war. He reveled in bloodshed for its own sake. He charged into battle with mindless fury, caring nothing for strategy or consequences, delighting only in the clash of weapons and the screams of the dying. Ares was war as slaughter, as madness, as destruction without purpose. Even Zeus himself admitted he hated Ares more than any of his other children. Athena was the opposite. She represented strategic warfare, war fought for a purpose, with intelligence, with planning, with minimal unnecessary casualties. Where Ares embodied the chaos of the battlefield, Athena embodied the general's tent, the war council, the clever stratagem that wins battles without needless bloodshed. She was war as necessary defense, as righteous protection, as intelligent application of force to achieve legitimate ends. She was the difference between a brawl and a chess match, between a massacre and a victory. This strategic approach to warfare wasn't separate from her wisdom. It was an expression of it. Athena understood that true strength comes not from brute force, but from knowing when and how to apply force, from understanding your enemy, from seeing 3 moves ahead like a master tactician. She was the goddess of practical wisdom, of cunning intelligence, of clever solutions to impossible problems. The ancient Greeks called this kind of intelligence metis, a word that meant cunning, craft, skill, wisdom, and strategy, all rolled into one. Interestingly, Metis was also the name of Athena's mother, a titaness who personified this very quality. We'll explore the story of Metis in detail later, but for now, understand that Athena inherited and embodied the ultimate form of practical, strategic intelligence. In Homer's Iliad, the characterization is crystal clear. When Athena goes to war, she inspires courage in warriors, steadies their spear arms, guides their strikes to find vulnerable points in enemy armor. She helps heroes think clearly in the chaos of battle, make smart tactical decisions, recognize when to advance and when to retreat. Her presence on the battlefield meant not just raw power, but intelligence, discipline, excellence in combat. She personified what the Greeks called arete in warfare, excellence, the ideal of what a warrior should be. This made Athena far more popular and respected than Ares among the ancient Greeks. They didn't romanticize war, they knew its horror too well. But they understood that sometimes war was necessary, that cities needed to be defended, that enemies would attack and must be met with organized resistance. Athena represented the way to fight when fighting became necessary, with strategy, with intelligence, with the goal of victory and peace rather than endless slaughter. But Athena's wisdom extended far beyond the battlefield. She was the goddess of wisdom in all its forms. She represented practical skills and crafts, weaving, pottery, metalworking, carpentry. She invented the chariot, the flute, and countless other innovations that advanced civilization. She was the patroness of all skilled labor, all craftsmanship, all the arts and techniques that separate civilized humanity from barbarity. In Athens, the city named for her, she was also considered the goddess of good counsel, of prudent restraint, of practical insight. She represented the kind of wisdom that kings and leaders needed, the ability to make good decisions, to see the consequences of actions, to balance competing needs, to govern justly. She was invoked before important decisions, consulted through oracles, honored as the source of wise governance. One of Athena's most important epithets was Pallas Athena. The origin of Pallas is disputed. Some say it came from a giant she killed, others from a childhood friend she accidentally slew, but it became inseparable from her name. Another crucial epithet was Parthenos, meaning virgin. Athena was conspicuous among the Olympian gods for never taking lovers, never having children, with one extremely complicated exception we'll discuss later, never being dominated by desire or romantic attachment. Her virginity was understood not as sexual prudery, but as representing the purity and independence of wisdom itself, reason unclouded by passion, intellect that serves no master but truth. She was also called Glaucopis, meaning gray-eyed or owl-eyed, referring both to her distinctive eye color and to the owl, her sacred animal and symbol of wisdom. The ancient Greeks saw something in the owl's watchful, unblinking gaze that reminded them of Athena: keen perception, ability to see in darkness, patience, wisdom. Athena was visualized in Greek art with remarkable consistency. She appears as a stately, mature woman, never young or flirtatious like Aphrodite, never matronly like Hera, wearing a Corinthian helmet pushed back on her head, armed with a spear, carrying a shield, and wrapped in or wearing the aegis, a magical protective garment that bore the head of the Gorgon Medusa and struck terror into enemies. She was always shown in armor, always ready for battle, because she had been born that way and would remain that way forever. This image, the armed virgin, wise and warlike, protective and powerful, made Athena one of the most appealing deities to ancient Greeks. Women could admire her independence and skill, her elevation of traditional female crafts, like weaving to divine status. Men could respect her martial prowess and strategic genius. Leaders could seek her wisdom. Warriors could invoke her aid. Craft people could honor her as their patron. She represented excellence in thought and action, the harmonious combination of mind and might that the Greeks valued above all else. Athena was also associated with civilization itself. Her gifts to humanity, the olive tree, various crafts and technologies, strategic warfare rather than chaos, all advanced human society. She taught people how to build ships, how to tame horses, how to cultivate olives. In a very real sense, Athena represented the movement from barbarism to civilization, from chaos to order, from ignorance to wisdom. She was progress personified. In the divine hierarchy of Mount Olympus, Athena held a unique position. She was Zeus's favorite child. He himself declared this repeatedly. Unlike his other children, Athena was allowed to carry Zeus's thunderbolts, to wear his aegis, to sit beside his throne and offer counsel that he actually listened to. Where other gods feared Zeus's wrath or had complicated, fraught relationships with him, Athena seemed to have his complete trust and approval. This special relationship stemmed partly from the unique circumstances of her birth, emerging from Zeus's own head, and partly from her temperament. Where other gods might scheme against Zeus or defy him, Athena supported the cosmic order. She believed in law, in legitimate authority, in proper hierarchies. She might offer counsel to Zeus, might even argue with him occasionally, but she ultimately supported his rule. She was, in many ways, the ideal daughter, powerful, wise, loyal, helpful, never causing the kinds of problems that his other children did. Her relationships with other gods were generally cordial, but not particularly close. She had a fierce rivalry with Poseidon, which we'll explore in detail when we discuss Athens. She had little use for Aphrodite and the complications of romantic love. She worked alongside Hephaestus in matters of craft and metallurgy. She occasionally clashed with Ares, despising his mindless brutality. But mostly, Athena seemed somewhat apart from the usual divine soap opera of Olympus, focused on her responsibilities, on helping heroes, on advancing civilization, rather than on the petty squabbles and love affairs that consumed so many other deities. Perhaps most importantly for understanding Athena's significance, we need to recognize her role as a guardian and helper of heroes. Athena loved heroes, not romantically, but in the sense that she saw in them the best potential of humanity, the combination of courage and intelligence that could achieve great things. She appeared again and again in Greek myths as the helper, guide, and protector of heroes on their quests. Perseus, who needed to kill Medusa, received crucial guidance and equipment from Athena. Heracles, performing his 12 labors, was repeatedly aided by Athena's counsel and intervention. Bellerophon received the golden bridle he needed to tame Pegasus from Athena's hands. Jason and the Argonauts sailed in a ship that Athena helped design. And most famously, Odysseus, the cleverest of all Greek heroes, the man most like Athena in temperament, received her constant guidance and protection throughout his adventures. This patronage of heroes reveals something crucial about Athena's character. She didn't just represent abstract wisdom or detached strategy. She actively engaged with the world, helped those who were trying to achieve difficult things, rewarded intelligence and courage. She was a practical goddess for a practical people, offering real help to those who proved themselves worthy. The ancient Greeks built temples to Athena throughout their world, in Athens obviously, but also in Sparta, in Corinth, in countless other cities. They held festivals in her honor. They dedicated offerings to her. They sought her blessing before battles, before embarking on journeys, before starting major projects. She wasn't just a mythological figure, but a real presence in their lives, a source of inspiration and guidance, a reminder that wisdom and courage together could accomplish anything. This is the goddess we're about to explore in depth. Athena, virgin goddess of wisdom and war. Born fully armed from Zeus's head, protector of heroes, patron of Athens, mistress of crafts, strategist supreme. Her myths are filled with cleverness and courage, with impossible challenges met and overcome through intelligence and skill. Her legacy shapes how we think about wisdom, strategy, and the proper use of power even today. Understanding Athena means understanding what the ancient Greeks valued most. Not just strength, but wisdom. Not just warfare, but righteous defense. Not just survival, but civilization. She represented humanity at its best. Thoughtful, skilled, courageous, just, always striving for excellence. And her story begins with one of the strangest births in all of mythology. A birth that would set the pattern for everything she would become. The miraculous birth from Zeus's head. If you want to understand Athena, you have to start with her birth, because it's unlike any other origin story in Greek mythology. Most gods were born in the normal way, even if their parents were divine. But Athena emerged fully grown from her father's head, wearing complete armor, wielding a spear, letting out a war cry so powerful it shook Mount Olympus and made the sea tremble. This wasn't just unusual, it was significant, symbolic, and set the tone for everything Athena would represent. But this miraculous birth was the end result of a story that began with Zeus's fear, a prophecy, and an act of desperate self-preservation that would have consequences the king of gods never fully anticipated. The story begins with Metis. In the early days, after Zeus and his siblings had overthrown the Titans and established themselves as the new rulers of the cosmos, Zeus took his first wife. Her name was Metis, and she was an Oceanid, one of the 3,000 daughters of the Titans Oceanus and Tethys. But Metis was no ordinary sea nymph. Her name meant cunning, craft, or wisdom, and she embodied these qualities completely. She was known as the wisest of all beings, wiser even than the gods themselves. Metis had actually played a crucial role in Zeus's victory over the Titans. It was Metis who gave Zeus the potion that made Cronus vomit up Zeus's siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, after Cronus had swallowed them to prevent the prophecy that his children would overthrow him. Without Metis' help, Zeus would never have had his allies, never have been able to wage the Titanomachy, never have become king of the gods. In a very real sense, Metis made Zeus's reign possible. Zeus was attracted to Metis' wisdom and pursued her. Different accounts say she tried to escape by shape-shifting into various forms, a quality Metis possessed, the ability to change her shape at will. But Zeus persisted. Eventually, they married, and Metis became pregnant with their first child. Everything seemed fine until Zeus received a prophecy. The exact source varies. Some say it came from his grandparents Gaia and Uranus. Others say it came from the fates themselves. But the message was clear and terrifying. Metis would bear 2 children. The first would be a daughter equal to Zeus in wisdom and courage. But the second would be a son who would be more powerful than Zeus himself. And this son would overthrow Zeus and become the new king of the gods, just as Zeus had overthrown Cronus, and Cronus had overthrown Uranus before him. Zeus had just fought a 10-year war to establish his rule. He had overthrown his own father to seize power. The idea that his own child might do the same to him was his worst nightmare come to life. But here's what's interesting. Zeus learned from Cronus's mistake. Cronus had tried to prevent the prophecy by swallowing his children, but it hadn't worked. The children survived inside him and were eventually freed. Cronus's brutality had accomplished nothing except guarantee his own downfall. So Zeus decided on a different approach. Instead of swallowing the children after they were born, he would swallow their mother while she was still pregnant, before the son who would threaten him could even be born. This way, the prophecy could never be fulfilled. One day, when Metis was pregnant with their first child, the daughter, Zeus came to Metis and challenged her to a contest. He had heard of her shape-shifting abilities, he said, and wanted to see them for himself. Could she really become anything? Metis, proud of her abilities, agreed to demonstrate. She transformed into various large and impressive forms. A lion, a serpent, perhaps even forms we don't have recorded. Then Zeus challenged her to become something small. Could she become as small as a fly? Metis, unsuspecting, transformed into a tiny insect, and the moment she did, Zeus swallowed her whole. Just like that, Metis was gone, trapped inside Zeus, pregnant with a daughter who would never be born in the normal way. Different sources offer different perspectives on what happened next. Some say Metis died inside Zeus. Others say she continued to live, existing somehow within Zeus's body or mind, continuing to give him counsel from within. The truth is ambiguous, lost in the depths of myth. But one thing was certain. Metis was still pregnant with Athena, and even inside Zeus, that pregnancy continued. Time passed. Zeus, having dealt with the threat of the prophecy, or so he thought, went about being king of the gods. He married Hera, his sister, who became his queen and the goddess of marriage and family. He had numerous other children by various goddesses and mortal women. Life on Olympus continued. But inside Zeus, something was growing. Metis, true to her nature, didn't just sit idle. Even trapped inside the king of gods, she prepared for her daughter's birth. Accounts vary on the details, but the most elaborate versions say that Metis forged armor for her unborn child. A helmet, a breastplate, a shield, and a spear. She crafted these weapons inside Zeus's belly, preparing Athena to be born as a warrior. Then one day, Zeus began to experience a terrible pain in his head. It started as a mild discomfort, but quickly grew into an agonizing, splitting headache, unlike anything he had ever experienced. The king of gods howled in pain. The sound echoed across Mount Olympus. Other gods came running to see what was wrong. Zeus's head felt like it was being split apart from the inside. The pain was so intense that even the most powerful god in the cosmos couldn't bear it. He paced, he shouted, he gripped his head in agony. Nothing helped. The pain only grew worse. The other gods watched in alarm and confusion. What could cause Zeus, the wielder of thunderbolts, the king of heaven, such terrible suffering? Was this some attack from a surviving titan? Some curse? Some cosmic illness? Finally, someone, different versions say it was Hermes or Prometheus or Athena herself, communicating somehow despite still being inside Zeus's head, realized what needed to be done. Zeus's head needed to be opened to release whatever was causing the pressure from within. They called for Hephaestus, the smith god, master of metalwork and craftsmanship. Now here's an interesting detail that reveals how convoluted Greek mythological chronology could be. Hephaestus was supposedly the son of Hera alone, born after Athena's birth, yet he's present at Athena's birth to split Zeus's head. Greek myths don't always worry too much about temporal consistency, and this is one of those cases where the story is more important than the timeline. Hephaestus came with his tools. Various accounts mention an axe, a hammer, a wedge, or a combination of these. Zeus, desperate for relief from the pain, ordered Hephaestus to split his skull. Can you imagine that moment? The greatest of gods, invulnerable to mortal harm, asking to have his head struck with a tool. The fear and courage required to actually do it. Hephaestus raised his implement, let's say it was a double-bladed axe, and brought it down with tremendous force on Zeus's forehead. There was a sound like thunder, like the world splitting apart. Zeus's skull opened, and from the cleft in his head, Athena sprang forth. She wasn't an infant, she wasn't helpless. She emerged as a fully grown woman, completely mature, and she wore the armor that Metis had crafted inside Zeus's mind. A magnificent helmet topped with a crest, a breastplate of gleaming bronze, a shield with the face of a gorgon. Though Medusa wasn't dead yet in the chronology, so this detail gets added later. And she wielded a long spear. She let out a tremendous war cry that shook Olympus, that made the earth tremble, that sent waves crashing higher on distant shores. The assembled gods stared in shock and awe. Here stood a new goddess, arrived at perfect maturity in an instant, armed for battle, radiating power and intelligence. Zeus's headache vanished immediately. He looked at his daughter and knew instantly that she was everything the prophecy had promised. Wise, courageous, equal to him in intelligence and strength. But she was no threat. She was his daughter, born from his own mind, loyal to him from the first moment. Different accounts provide different details about the god's reactions. Some say Ares immediately recognized a rival and became wary. Some say Hera was jealous that Zeus had produced such a magnificent child. Without her involvement, this supposedly motivated her to later conceive Hephaestus by herself, to prove she could also produce offspring alone. Some say the gods simply erupted in cheers and in celebration at the birth of this marvelous new deity. The symbolism of Athena's birth is rich and layered. First, and most obviously, she was born from Zeus's head, from the seat of thought and intelligence. She wasn't born from his loins, which would represent base desire or simple procreation, but from his mind, from intellect itself. This forever associated Athena with wisdom, with thought, with the life of the mind. She was literally the child of Zeus's head, wisdom made manifest. Second, she emerged fully grown and fully armed. She never experienced childhood, never went through a phase of learning or development. From the first instant of her existence, she was complete, perfect, ready for battle. This symbolized that wisdom and strategic warfare don't need to be learned through experience. They exist as perfect forms, complete knowledge, total preparedness. Athena represented ideal wisdom, ideal strategy, and ideal readiness. Third, her birth meant that Métis, the mother she never knew, lived on through her. Athena inherited all of her mother's cunning intelligence, her practical wisdom, her strategic thinking. The prophecy had said Metis' daughter would equal Zeus in wisdom, and Athena did, because she combined Zeus's power with Metis' intelligence. She was the perfect synthesis of her parents, embodying the best of both. Fourth, the unusual nature of her birth freed Athena from certain traditional female roles. She wasn't born from a mother, wasn't raised as a daughter, never identified with maternal or domestic functions the way Hera or Demeter did. This allowed her to occupy a unique space in the divine hierarchy, female but not feminine in traditional ways, a virgin but not weak, a warrior but not merely a companion to male warriors. She was something new, something different. Fifth, her birth from Zeus's head created an unprecedented closeness between father and daughter. Athena was more Zeus's child than any of his other offspring, because she came directly from him, because Metis had been subsumed into him. Zeus trusted Athena in ways he trusted no other god. He gave her his aegis to wear, his thunderbolts to carry, his counsel to seek. She was, in every sense, his favorite child, the one most like him, the one he relied on most. The ancient Greeks understood all these layers of meaning. When they told the story of Athena's birth, they were saying something about the nature of wisdom, about legitimate authority, about the relationship between mind and power, about gender and divine roles. The image of Athena springing from Zeus's head became one of the most popular subjects in Greek art, painted on countless vases, sculpted in temple friezes, described in hymns and poems. One detail worth noting, after Athena's birth, Metis never emerged from Zeus. The prophecy had mentioned 2 children, a daughter and a son, but the son was never born. By swallowing Metis pregnant with only Athena, Zeus had averted the threat. The son who would overthrow him was never conceived. The prophecy was circumvented, the danger avoided. Some accounts suggest Metis continued to exist inside Zeus, offering him wisdom and counsel from within. This would explain why Zeus, while powerful, was also considered relatively wise among gods, at least compared to his father Cronus or grandfather Uranus. His wisdom came from Metis, alive inside him, whispering counsel that only he could hear. Whether this is literally true in the mythology or poetic metaphor is unclear, but it's a fascinating idea that Zeus's wisdom throughout his reign came from the wife he had swallowed, from the mother of his wisest daughter. Athena's birth also set the pattern for her relationship with her father. She was Zeus's creature in a way no other god was. She supported his rule, defended his authority, enforced his will. In myths where other gods rebelled or challenged Zeus, Athena almost always stood with her father. She was the perfect daughter, the ideal offspring, powerful enough to be truly useful, wise enough to offer good counsel, loyal enough to never pose a threat. This unusual birth, this emergence from her father's head as a fully formed warrior goddess, also meant that Athena had no mother, in any practical sense. Metis had conceived her, had crafted her armor, but had never held her, never raised her, never taught her anything directly. Athena came into existence already knowing everything she needed to know, already being everything she would ever be. She had no childhood memories, no maternal influence, beyond the inherited wisdom that was part of her essence, no experience of vulnerability or dependence. This might explain her virginity, not just the technical fact of it, but what it represented. Athena never sought romantic love, never bore children, never experienced the complications of desire and relationships that tangled up so many other gods. She was complete in herself, needing nothing from others, depending on no one. Her virginity was a form of independence, of self-sufficiency, of power that owed nothing to anyone else. The birth of Athena, then, was more than just a bizarre mythological story. It was a statement about the nature of wisdom, about legitimate power, about the relationship between thought and action, between mind and might. It established Athena as unique among the gods, neither fully male nor fully female in traditional ways, but something else, something beyond those categories. A warrior who never gloried in bloodshed, a virgin who was no one's daughter in the usual sense, an advisor who had never been young, a goddess who emerged complete and has remained unchanged since that first moment when she sprang from Zeus's splitting head, crying out in triumph, armed and armored and ready for eternity. Symbols and sacred attributes. Athena carried and was associated with a remarkable array of symbols, each rich with meaning, each telling us something important about her nature and her role in Greek religion and culture. These weren't just random attributes assigned to her. They were carefully chosen emblems that embodied aspects of her character, her powers, and her relationship to humanity. Let's explore the most important of these symbols and understand what they meant to the ancient Greeks. The owl, keen perception, and wisdom. Perhaps no symbol is more closely associated with Athena than the owl. Specifically, the little owl, or Athena Noctua, became virtually synonymous with the goddess. The connection between Athena and owls runs deep in Greek culture, so deep that even today, when we think of symbols for wisdom, an owl often comes to mind, thanks to this ancient association. But why an owl? The ancient Greeks saw several qualities in owls that reminded them of Athena. First, owls have large, forward-facing eyes that seem to stare with keen intelligence and perception. That unwavering gaze, those eyes that seem to see everything, reflected Athena's ability to perceive truth, to see through deception, to understand situations completely. One of Athena's most common epithets was glaucopis, usually translated as gray-eyed, but sometimes as owl-eyed, referring to this piercing, all-seeing quality. Second, owls are nocturnal hunters with extraordinary vision in darkness. They can see what others cannot, can hunt successfully when everything is shrouded in shadow. This paralleled Athena's wisdom. She could see solutions where others saw only problems, could find the way forward when all seemed dark and hopeless. Her wisdom was a form of vision, of seeing clearly when others were blind. Third, owls are remarkably silent in flight despite their size. They can swoop down on prey without warning, appearing seemingly from nowhere. This connected to Athena's role as a goddess of strategic warfare. She valued surprise, clever tactics, silent approach over loud announcement. Like an owl hunting, Athena taught that victory often comes to those who strike swiftly and unexpectedly, rather than announcing their presence. Fourth, owls were seen as wise in ancient Greek culture, even before becoming specifically associated with Athena. There was something in the owl's solemn, thoughtful appearance, its tendency to sit still and observe before acting, its apparent lack of fear that suggested wisdom and knowledge to the Greeks. The little owl appeared constantly in Athenian imagery. It was featured on Athenian coins, stamped on the reverse side of silver tetradrachms. This made the owl one of the most widely distributed images in the ancient world. Every piece of Athenian currency carried Athena's symbol, spreading her iconography throughout the Mediterranean wherever Greek traders traveled. Even today, archaeologists find these ancient coins with their owl designs, silent testimony to Athena's importance. In art, Athena was often shown with an owl perched on her shoulder or sitting beside her. The owl was her constant companion, her sacred animal, a living embodiment of the wisdom she represented. To see an owl, especially in Athens, was considered a good omen, a sign of Athena's presence or favor. The olive tree, peace, prosperity, and civilization. The olive tree was Athena's gift to Athens and to humanity, and it became one of her most important symbols. The story of how she created the first olive tree would determine the patronage of Athens. We'll explore this in detail in the next section, but the significance of the olive tree as a symbol deserves close attention. In the Mediterranean world, olive trees were extraordinarily valuable. They provided food, the olives themselves, which could be eaten fresh or preserved. They provided olive oil, which had countless uses: cooking, lighting lamps, religious offerings, medicine, skincare, even athletic training. Athletes would oil their bodies. The wood of olive trees, while slow growing, was dense and valuable for construction and woodworking. Even the leaves and bark had uses. But beyond these practical benefits, the olive tree symbolized something deeper. Olive trees are slow growing and long lived. They take years to begin producing fruit, but once established, they can live for centuries, even millennia. They represent patience, long-term thinking, investment in the future. They grow best in peaceful times, when farmers can tend them over years and generations. War and conflict disrupt olive cultivation. Armies cut down groves. Battles destroy orchards. Instability prevents the careful long-term management olives require. So the olive tree became a symbol of peace, prosperity, and civilization. It represented the choice to build rather than destroy, to cultivate rather than conquer, to think of the future rather than only the immediate. When Athena offered an olive tree as her gift to Athens, she was offering all of this, not just a useful plant, but a way of life, a vision of civilization. The olive tree also connected to Athena's role as a goddess of wisdom and strategy. Strategic thinking requires looking ahead, understanding consequences, planning for the long term. An olive tree requiring years to mature, but then providing bounty for centuries, was the perfect metaphor for this kind of wisdom. Quick gains, like Poseidon's impressive saltwater spring or magnificent horse, might be immediately impressive, but Athena's gift proved its value over time, just as wise decisions prove their worth in the long run. In Athens, the original olive tree that Athena planted, or at least a tree sacred to her and considered her descendant, stood on the Acropolis. It was cared for with reverence. considered a living link to the goddess. When the Persians sacked Athens in 480 BCE and burned the Acropolis, they also burned this sacred olive tree. But according to the historian Herodotus, the tree sprouted new growth the very next day. A shoot 18 inches long, demonstrating Athena's continued presence and the resilience of Athens itself. The aegis, protection, authority, and terror. The aegis is one of Athena's most distinctive attributes, though exactly what it was remains somewhat unclear. In Homer and early sources, the aegis seems to be a kind of protective garment, sometimes described as a cloak, sometimes as a breastplate or body armor, sometimes as a shield. It was made of imperishable material, fringed with golden tassels, and imbued with a divine power. When Athena wore or carried it, the aegis inspired terror in her enemies and protected her allies. Later tradition added an important detail to the aegis, the head of the Gorgon Medusa. After Perseus killed Medusa with Athena's help, as we'll explore later, he gave the severed head to Athena as a thank you gift. Athena attached Medusa's head to the center of her aegis. Since Medusa's gaze could turn people to stone, even after death, having her head on the aegis made it a terrifying weapon. Enemies who looked at Athena's aegis would see Medusa's face staring back, frozen in its final moment of horror, snakes writhing in place of hair, and they would feel paralyzing fear. The aegis was originally Zeus's. It was one of his primary attributes, associated with his storms and power, but Zeus gave Athena permission to wear and use the aegis, a gift and honor he granted to no other god. This sharing of the aegis symbolized the unique relationship between Zeus and Athena, the trust and authority he invested in her. When Athena wore the aegis, she carried Zeus's own protection and power. In some accounts, the aegis was made from the skin of the goat Amalthea, who had nursed the infant Zeus when he was hidden from Cronus. After the goat died, its hide became the aegis. This origin story connected the aegis to Zeus's own survival and rise to power, making it a deeply significant object in divine history. The aegis as a symbol represented several things. Divine protection. It was impenetrable, could shield both Athena and those she chose to protect. Legitimate authority. It came from Zeus and marked Athena as his chosen deputy. And overwhelming power. It could inspire terror, turn aside attacks, demonstrate divine might. In battle, when Athena shook the aegis, the sound was said to be like thunder, and her enemies would scatter in fear. Helmet, armor, spear, and shield. Readiness for war. Athena was consistently depicted wearing a helmet, typically a Corinthian helmet, the tall, crested type that covered the head and cheeks, leaving only the face visible. Sometimes the helmet sat on her head, sometimes she's shown with it pushed back, but it was always present. This permanent armor reflected her nature. She was born wearing it, and she never took it off. She was always ready for battle, always prepared, always armed. Her armor wasn't just decorative. It was functional, practical, symbolizing her role as a warrior goddess. But it was also beautiful, crafted with skill, shining with divine radiance, demonstrating that warfare, when properly conducted, could be an art form, requiring craft and intelligence as much as strength. The spear Athena carried was another constant attribute. Unlike Ares, who might be shown with various weapons of slaughter, Athena's spear was consistent, long, well-crafted, primarily a thrusting weapon, rather than one for wild hacking. It symbolized precise, directed force, the strategic strike rather than indiscriminate violence. Her shield varied in depiction. Sometimes it bore the Gorgoneon, Medusa's head, sometimes other images. The shield represented defense as much as offense. Athena protected those she cared about, shielded heroes and cities, warded off threats. Her warfare wasn't about conquest for its own sake, but about protection of what deserved protecting. All of this armor and weaponry together created an image of Athena as perpetually ready for conflict, but not seeking it out. She was armed because the world was dangerous, because cities needed defending, because threats would come whether desired or not. Her armor was a statement. She was prepared to fight when necessary, but the armor itself was defensive. She wasn't an aggressor, but a guardian. The serpent, ancient wisdom, and protection snakes were also sacred to Athena, though less prominently than owls or olive trees. Several traditions connected Athena with serpents. In some myths, a sacred snake lived in the Erechtheion, the temple on the Acropolis that housed both Athena and Poseidon's marks from their contest. This snake was considered Athena's guardian or ward, and was fed honeycakes regularly. During the Persian invasion, the snake refused food, which the Athenians interpreted as a sign that Athena had left the city, prompting them to evacuate. Athena was also connected with Erichthonius, the early king of Athens who was part snake, part human. We'll explore this strange story when discussing Athena's virginity. She raised him, protected him, and gave him to others in a basket with instructions not to look inside, because the snake parts of his nature would frighten them. Snakes in Greek symbolism often represented earth, ancient wisdom, regeneration because they shed their skin, and protective guardianship. Athena's association with serpents added another layer to her symbolism. She wasn't just the goddess of human civilization and its arts, but also had connections to older, chthonic, earth-related powers. She was ancient, wise with the wisdom of earth itself, regenerating like snakes renew themselves, protective like serpents guard sacred places. Architectural and artistic representations, one more symbol deserves mention. The Parthenon itself, the magnificent temple on the Acropolis of Athens. While not technically an attribute like an owl or olive tree, the Parthenon stood as the supreme architectural symbol of Athena's importance and Athens' devotion to her. Built in the 5th century BCE during Athens' Golden Age, the Parthenon was the most perfect achievement of Greek architecture, a temple that balanced mathematical precision with aesthetic beauty, embodying in stone the values Athena represented: wisdom, craft, proportion, excellence. Inside the Parthenon stood the Athena Parthenos, a colossal statue created by the sculptor Phidias, standing over 38 feet tall, made of gold and ivory over a wooden frame. This was the most famous representation of Athena in the ancient world. She stood in full armor, holding Nike, the goddess of victory, in one hand, and resting her shield beside her, with the serpent Erichthonius coiled at her feet. The statue no longer exists. It was destroyed or lost in late antiquity, but Roman copies and descriptions allow us to imagine its magnificence. The statue embodied everything Athena represented: warrior but civilized, powerful but beautiful, armed but not aggressive, virgin but not weak, wise and victorious and worthy of the greatest artistic achievement humans could create. In her honor, every symbol associated with Athena told a story. The owl said, "Wisdom sees what others cannot." The olive tree said, "Civilization requires patience and peace." The aegis said, legitimate power protects and inspires respect. The armor said, always be ready to defend what matters. The serpent said, wisdom is ancient and regenerating. Together, these symbols created a complete portrait of Athena, complex, multifaceted, embodying values that the ancient Greeks held most dear and that continue to resonate even today. Contest for Athens and creation of the olive tree. One of the most important myths about Athena is her contest with Poseidon for patronage of the city that would become Athens. This story reveals much about Athena's character, her gifts to humanity, and why the ancient Greeks valued wisdom over raw power. It's also a foundational myth for Athens itself, explaining not just the city's name, but its character and values. The story begins in a time before Athens was Athens, when it was simply a settlement in Attica, not yet a great city, not yet bearing the name that would become synonymous with wisdom, democracy, and culture. The people there needed a patron deity, a god or goddess who would protect them, bless their endeavors, be honored above all others in their temples and festivals. In exchange, the deity would gain worshippers, sacrifices, temples, fame, and influence. Two deities wanted this honor: Poseidon, the powerful god of the seas, and Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. Poseidon had good reasons to want Athens. He was one of the three most powerful gods, along with Zeus and Hades, lord of all the world's waters, controller of earthquakes. Athens was a coastal settlement. Its people would depend on the sea for trade, fishing, naval power. Poseidon could offer them mastery of the waters, protection during voyages, success in maritime endeavors. Athena also had compelling reasons to want the city. She valued civilization, culture, skilled crafts, wise governance, all things that a great city could embody. She saw potential in these people and their settlement. She wanted to help them build something magnificent, to be their guide and protector as they developed into something greater, rather than fight over the city, which would destroy the very prize they sought. Poseidon and Athena agreed to a contest. Each would present a gift to the people, demonstrating what they could offer as patron. The people, led by their king Cecrops, would judge which gift was more valuable, and the winner would become the city's patron and give the city its name. Various sources place this contest on the Acropolis, the rocky outcrop that rises above the city, where later the Parthenon and other temples would stand. This was sacred ground, the heart of the settlement, the perfect place for such a momentous decision. Poseidon went first. The accounts vary slightly on what exactly he did, but the core action is consistent. He struck the ground, or a rock, with his mighty trident. The earth shook with the force of the blow. And from where he struck, something emerged. In some versions, a spring of water burst forth, but this was salt water, seawater brought forth from underground, not fresh water suitable for drinking. In other versions, instead of or in addition to the spring, a horse appeared, magnificent, powerful, the first horse ever seen, a gift of tremendous value. Some accounts combine both. Poseidon struck the rock, producing a saltwater spring, and then presented a horse as his gift to show what else he could provide. Let's consider what Poseidon was offering. If it was the saltwater spring, this demonstrated his power over waters, his connection to the sea that surrounded and sustained the settlement. If it was a horse, this was an extraordinary gift. Horses would revolutionize transportation, agriculture, and especially warfare, Cavalry and chariots would make armies far more mobile and powerful. A horse represented martial might, speed, power, conquest. Both gifts were impressive. The spring showed divine power, water bursting from solid rock. The horse, if present, was beautiful, strong, valuable beyond measure. Poseidon's gifts emphasized power, expansion, military strength. With his patronage, Athens could become a great naval power, could dominate the seas, and could use horses to build cavalry that would conquer neighbors. Now it was Athena's turn. The assembled people watched as the goddess approached. She didn't strike the ground with violence or make the earth shake. Instead, she knelt down and, according to most accounts, touched the earth gently with her spear or hand, and from where she touched, a tree began to grow. Not just any tree, but an olive tree, green, leafy, soon bearing fruit. It grew to maturity before their eyes, demonstrating divine power while also showing what the tree would become, what it would provide year after year, generation after generation. The people looked at this tree, perhaps initially less impressed than they had been by Poseidon's dramatic spring or magnificent horse. An olive tree. It wasn't as immediately spectacular. It didn't demonstrate raw power like water bursting from rock. It wasn't as beautiful as a horse. But then Athena explained what her gift meant. The olive tree would provide food, olives that could feed people. It would provide oil for cooking, for lighting lamps in the darkness, for religious ceremonies, for medicine, for cosmetics. The wood of the olive tree would be useful for building and crafting. The tree represented peace and prosperity. It required peaceful times to cultivate, to grow, to harvest. It was a gift that would endure, that would benefit not just the current generation, but generations to come. More than the practical benefits, Athena's olive tree represented a choice about what kind of civilization the Athenians wanted to build. Poseidon's gifts emphasized power, conquest, maritime dominance, military strength. These weren't bad things. They had their place. But Athena's gift emphasized cultivation, patience, long-term thinking, peace, prosperity, culture, civilization. The olive tree said, build something that will last, something that will benefit your children and their children. King Cecrops and the assembled people deliberated. This wasn't a simple choice. Poseidon's gifts were powerful, useful, immediately impressive. The sea was vitally important to any coastal city. Horses would be valuable for countless purposes. But Athena's olive tree, the more they considered it, seemed more valuable in the long run. Salt water couldn't be drunk, and the settlement already had access to the sea, so a saltwater spring added little. A horse was magnificent, but horses needed to be fed, cared for, trained, and horses represented war, conquest, conflict. The olive tree required patience, but provided lasting benefit. It represented peace where horses represented war. It represented cultivation where power represented domination. The people chose Athena's gift. They decided the olive tree was more valuable than the spring or horse. Athena would be their patron goddess, and they would name their city after her, Athens. Poseidon's reaction was exactly what you'd expect from the temperamental sea god. He was furious. How dare these mortals reject him, one of the three most powerful gods, in favor of his niece? How dare they prefer a tree to his magnificent gifts? His rage was terrible. In his anger, Poseidon flooded the Thracian plain near Athens with salt water. ruining agricultural land and causing hardship. Some versions say he instead sent a drought, or both a flood and drought in sequence, punishing the Athenians for rejecting him, making them regret their choice, at least temporarily. But the decision stood. Athens was Athens, not Poseidonia or some other name honoring the sea god. The olive tree that Athena planted, or at least trees considered descended from it, would grow on the Acropolis for millennia. Athens would honor Athena above all other gods, would build the Parthenon in her honor, would celebrate festivals dedicated to her, would feature the owl and olive branch on their coins and seals. This myth became foundational to Athenian identity. It explained their name, yes, but more importantly, it explained their values. Athens wasn't just another Greek city-state focused solely on military conquest. Yes, Athens would build a powerful navy, Poseidon's domain, ironically. Yes, Athens would fight wars when necessary. But Athens was also the center of Greek philosophy, art, drama, architecture, democracy. Athens represented the life of the mind, culture, wisdom, everything Athena embodied. The choice of Athena's olive tree over Poseidon's gifts became a statement. We choose wisdom over mere power, cultivation over conquest, long-term prosperity over short-term gain, peace over war, civilization over barbarism. This was the ideal, even if Athens didn't always live up to it. But the ideal mattered. It shaped how Athenians saw themselves, what they aspired to be. The story had other consequences too. It established a lasting rivalry between Athena and Poseidon. They clashed again in the Trojan War, both supporting the Greeks initially, but often working at cross purposes. Their rivalry continued in various myths and stories. This added dramatic tension to Greek mythology, this ongoing conflict between two powerful deities, rooted in that ancient contest for Athens. The contest also showed Athena's character. She didn't try to win through intimidation or displays of raw power. She didn't offer immediate gratification or spectacular gifts. Instead, she offered something that required understanding to appreciate, something whose value would become clear over time. She trusted the Athenians to be wise enough to recognize wisdom when they saw it. And they were physical. Evidence of the contest allegedly remained on the Acropolis. The spot where Poseidon struck the ground was marked, supposedly still showing the 3 marks of his trident's prongs. The saltwater well he created was also preserved, or at least a well containing salty water was pointed to as evidence. These sites were incorporated into the Erechtheion, a temple that housed both Athena and Poseidon, acknowledging both deities even though Athena had won the contest. Athena's original olive tree, or trees descended from it, grew on the Acropolis for centuries. When the Persians invaded in 480 BCE and burned the Acropolis, they destroyed this sacred tree. But according to Herodotus, a new shoot appeared the very next day, growing 18 inches overnight. This miraculous regrowth symbolized Athens' resilience, Athena's continued protection, and the enduring nature of her gift. The olive tree remained central to Athenian culture. Olive branches were given as prizes in the Panathenaic Games. Olive oil was one of Athens' major exports. The olive tree became synonymous with Athens, with Athena, with wisdom and peace. Even today, thousands of years later, when we think of peace, we often imagine an olive branch, a symbol that traces directly back to Athena's gift. In this ancient contest, the story of Athena's contest with Poseidon is ultimately about choosing what kind of society to build. Do you value power or wisdom, conquest or cultivation, immediate gains or long-term prosperity, war or peace? The Athenians chose wisdom, cultivation, prosperity, and peace. They chose Athena. And that choice, mythological though it was, helped shape one of the greatest civilizations in human history. A city that would give the world democracy, philosophy, drama, and countless other innovations. The olive tree Athena planted bore fruit far beyond what anyone watching that ancient contest could have imagined. The judgment of Paris and the Trojan War. The Trojan War, the greatest conflict in Greek mythology, began because of a beauty contest. A golden apple and a Trojan prince who made a fateful choice. Athena played a crucial role in this war, and understanding her involvement reveals much about her character, her capacity for holding grudges, her tactical brilliance, and her fierce loyalty to those she deemed worthy. The whole catastrophe began at a wedding, the marriage of the hero Peleus to the sea nymph Thetis. All the gods were invited to attend except one, Eris, the goddess of discord and strife. Being excluded from a divine celebration was a deliberate insult, and Eris decided to get revenge in a particularly clever way. She appeared at the wedding uninvited, carrying a golden apple inscribed with the words, "To the fairest," or "For the most beautiful." She tossed this apple into the midst of the celebration and left. Immediately, 3 goddesses each claimed the apple. Hera, queen of the gods, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, and Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. Think about this for a moment. The apple wasn't inscribed to Hera or to Aphrodite. It just said the fairest, implying that one goddess was more beautiful than the others. This created an impossible situation. How could this dispute be resolved? Each goddess genuinely believed she deserved the apple. Each had compelling arguments. None would willingly concede to the others. The goddesses took their dispute to Zeus, expecting him to judge which of them was most beautiful. But Zeus was far too clever to fall into that trap. No matter which goddess he chose, he would make 2 enemies among the most powerful deities on Olympus. If he chose his wife Hera, Athena and Aphrodite would be offended. If he chose Athena, his favorite daughter, or Aphrodite, Hera, his jealous wife, would make his life miserable. There was no winning move, so Zeus declined to judge. Instead, he appointed someone else to decide. Paris, a prince of Troy, who worked as a shepherd on Mount Ida, supposedly known for his fair judgment and handsomeness. Paris would determine which goddess was fairest, which would receive the golden apple. The 3 goddesses appeared before Paris, each in their full divine glory, and each wanting to win, offered Paris a bribe, a gift beyond mortal imagining if he would choose her. Hera offered political power. She promised to make him ruler over all of Europe and Asia, lord of vast territories, the most powerful man in the world. With Hera's support, Paris could conquer kingdoms, build an empire, command nations. She offered him power and dominion. Athena offered martial prowess and strategic success. She promised to make him the greatest warrior who ever lived, undefeated in battle, legendary for his strategic genius. She offered military glory, victory in every conflict, fame as a conqueror and hero. With Athena's guidance, Paris could achieve immortal renown through warfare. Aphrodite offered love. Specifically, she promised Paris the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta, who was said to be the loveliest woman ever born, so beautiful that her face could launch 1,000 ships, as it eventually would. She promised Paris that Helen would fall in love with him, would leave her husband for him, would be his completely. Paris had to choose. Think about what each offer represented. Hera's offer was practical: power, wealth, political dominion over vast territories. Athena's offer appealed to glory and legacy, becoming legendary, being remembered forever as an undefeated warrior. Aphrodite's offer was personal, immediate, emotional. The most beautiful woman in the world, devoted to him. Paris chose Aphrodite. He awarded her the golden apple, accepting her promise of Helen's love. The moment he made this choice, he made permanent enemies of Hera and Athena. Both goddesses felt personally insulted. Paris had essentially declared Aphrodite more beautiful than them. Worse, he had rejected what they offered, power and military glory, in favor of romantic love. For Athena especially, being rejected for something as irrational as love must have been particularly galling. She was the goddess of wisdom, and Paris had chosen unwisely. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Aphrodite arranged for Paris to visit Sparta under the guise of diplomatic mission. There he met Helen, who was married to King Menelaus. Under Aphrodite's influence, Helen fell in love with Paris, and the two eloped, fleeing back to Troy together. This was an enormous scandal. Helen was married. Paris was violating guest friendship by seducing his host wife, and the act was essentially a declaration of war. Menelaus was enraged. His brother Agamemnon, the most powerful king in Greece, assembled a coalition of Greek city-states to retrieve Helen and punish Troy for Paris's offense. This army, including heroes like Achilles, Odysseus, Ajax, and many others, sailed across the Aegean and laid siege to Troy. The Trojan War, which would last 10 years and cost countless lives, had begun, and Athena, from the very start, sided passionately with the Greeks against Troy. Her support wasn't subtle or measured. She actively intervened in the war, helping Greek warriors, guiding their strategy, even defying Zeus's commands to stay out of mortal conflicts. Her grudge against Paris and Troy for the judgment was deep and lasting. Athena's involvement in the Trojan War, as described in Homer's Iliad, shows her at her most active and engaged. She appears constantly in the epic, always working to aid the Greeks, called Achaeans or Dainons in the poem. Let's look at some key examples of her interventions. In Book 1, when Achilles is about to draw his sword and kill Agamemnon after being insulted, Athena appears to him, invisible to everyone else, and stops him by grabbing his hair. She counsels restraint, promising that Achilles will receive great gifts for this insult if he controls his rage now. This scene is often interpreted as Athena representing the voice of reason, the wise counsel that prevents rash action. In Book 4, Athena deliberately breaks a truce between the Greeks and Trojans to restart the fighting. She disguises herself as a Trojan, finds a Trojan archer named Pandarus, and convinces him to shoot an arrow at Menelaus. The arrow hits Menelaus, but doesn't kill him. Athena makes sure of this. However, the truce is broken. The war resumes in earnest, and the Greeks have legitimate grievance since the Trojans supposedly attacked during a truce. This is Athena at her most strategic and ruthless. She wants Troy destroyed, and she's willing to manipulate events to ensure the war continues. In Book 5, Athena gives special power and protection to the Greek warrior Diomedes. She grants him the ability to distinguish gods from mortals on the battlefield, normally difficult to do when gods disguise themselves. With Athena's help, Diomedes has in Aristea a passage where he displays extraordinary prowess, cutting through Trojan ranks. He even wounds two gods who are helping the Trojans. Aphrodite, naturally, Athena has no love for the goddess who won the golden apple, and Ares himself. Athena actually guides Diomedes' spear to strike Ares, demonstrating her superiority over her brutal brother, even in his own domain of warfare. In Book 22, the climactic confrontation between Achilles and Hector, Athena plays a decisive role. Hector, the greatest Trojan warrior and Troy's main defender, knows he must face Achilles but is terrified. When Achilles approaches, Hector's nerve breaks and he runs. Achilles chases him around the walls of Troy 3 times. Finally, Athena intervenes. She disguises herself as Hector's brother Deiphobus, appears beside Hector, and tells him she'll help him fight Achilles. Encouraged by having his brother as backup, Hector stops running and turns to face Achilles. But it's a trick. There is no Deiphobus. Athena has deceived Hector into stopping his flight. During the fight, Hector throws his spear, misses Achilles, and turns to get another spear from his brother, only to find nobody there. He realizes he's been tricked, that he's alone, that Athena has lured him to his death. Achilles kills Hector, the fall of Troy becomes inevitable, and Athena's deception was crucial to this outcome. These are just a few examples. Throughout the Iliad, Athena is constantly active, inspiring Greek warriors, protecting them from Trojan attacks, undermining Trojan efforts, offering strategic advice, even physically intervening in battles. She defies Zeus when he orders the gods not to interfere. She works tirelessly to ensure Greek victory. But Athena's involvement didn't end when Troy fell. In fact, she played a role in the fall itself. Though the Iliad ends before Troy's destruction, later epics describe how the Greeks finally won. It was Odysseus, Athena's favorite mortal, who devised the stratagem of the Trojan horse, a huge wooden horse, hollow inside, filled with Greek warriors. The Greeks pretended to sail away, leaving the horse as an offering to Athena. The Trojans, thinking the war was over and wanting to honor Athena, brought the horse inside the city walls. That night, the Greek warriors emerged, opened the gates for their army, which had returned under cover of darkness, and Troy was sacked. Some accounts say Athena herself suggested the idea of the wooden horse to Odysseus. Others say she helped in its construction. Either way, this clever stratagem, using deception rather than brute force, winning through intelligence rather than pure military might, was exactly Athena's style. It was the perfect conclusion to her involvement in the war. Troy fell not to overwhelming force, but to cunning strategy. However, after Troy fell, Athena's support for the Greeks turned to anger. During the sack of Troy, the Greeks committed various atrocities. One particularly offended Athena. A Greek warrior named Ajax the Lesser raped the Trojan princess Cassandra inside Athena's temple, right at the goddess's altar. Cassandra had sought sanctuary there, believing she'd be safe in a sacred place. Ajax violated both Cassandra and Athena's temple in one awful act. The Greeks didn't punish Ajax adequately for this sacrilege, so Athena, along with Poseidon, sent storms to destroy much of the Greek fleet on its journey home. Many Greeks drowned. Others were scattered across the Mediterranean, taking years to find their way home if they survived at all. Even those who made it home found trouble waiting. Agamemnon was murdered by his wife and her lover, for instance. This shows an important aspect of Athena's character. She demanded respect and proper conduct even from those she supported. The Greeks had been her allies for 10 years. But when they committed sacrilege in her temple and failed to properly punish the offense, she turned on them without hesitation. Justice and proper religious observance mattered more to her than previous loyalty. The Trojan War myths reveal Athena as fiercely partisan, capable of holding decade-long grudges. She never forgave Paris or Troy for the judgment, willing to use deception and manipulation to achieve her goals. Brilliantly strategic in her interventions, and absolutely committed to seeing her side win. But they also show her sense of justice. When her own allies violated sacred law, she punished them as well. The war that began with Paris's choice of Aphrodite over Athena ended with Troy destroyed, largely because Athena never forgot the insult and worked tirelessly to ensure Troy paid for Paris's rejection. It was Athena at her most vengeful, her most strategic, her most actively engaged in mortal affairs. And it was ultimately Athena's favored strategy. Odysseus's clever horse that won the war that 10 years of fighting could not. Wisdom and cunning prevailed over strength and courage, exactly as Athena always knew they would. Protector and guide of heroes, strategic wisdom in action. One of Athena's most consistent and important roles in Greek mythology was as a protector and guide of heroes. She loved heroes, not romantically, but as a patron and mentor. She saw in them the best potential of humanity, courage combined with intelligence, strength tempered with wisdom, ambition directed toward worthy goals. And she helped them, guiding, advising, empowering them to achieve seemingly impossible feats. Let's explore some of her most important relationships with heroes and understand what they reveal about her character. Perseus and the slaying of Medusa. One of Athena's most famous proteges was Perseus, a hero tasked with an impossible mission: to kill Medusa and bring back her head. Medusa was one of the three Gorgons, monstrous sisters with snakes for hair and faces so horrifying that anyone who looked directly at them turned instantly to stone. Even worse, Medusa still retained this power after death. Her severed head could petrify anyone who gazed upon it. Perseus had been sent on this quest by King Polydectes, who wanted Perseus dead and hoped the impossible task would accomplish this. But Perseus had divine heritage. Zeus was his father, and, more importantly, divine help. Athena appeared to Perseus as he prepared for his journey. She couldn't go with him. Gods usually couldn't interfere too directly in mortal quests, but she could equip him and give him advice. She gave Perseus several crucial gifts. First and most famously, she gave him her polished bronze shield. This shield was so perfectly polished that it reflected like a mirror. Athena explained how Perseus could use it. He must never look directly at Medusa, or he would turn to stone like all her other victims. Instead, he should look only at Medusa's reflection in the shield. This way, he could see where Medusa was, and what she was doing without meeting her deadly gaze. This gift perfectly encapsulated Athena's approach to challenges. Solve problems through cleverness, not brute force. Perseus couldn't overpower a Gorgon through strength. The curse would kill him first. But by using the shield as a mirror, by approaching the problem indirectly, he could accomplish what seemed impossible. Athena also helped Perseus find other items he'd need. Winged sandals from Hermes that let him fly, Hades' helm of invisibility, and a special sword sharp enough to cut through Medusa's neck. She directed him to the Graeae, 3 old women who shared one eye between them, who could tell him where to find Medusa's lair. When Perseus finally confronted Medusa, he used Athena's strategy perfectly, approaching while invisible thanks to Hades' helm. Watching Medusa's reflection in the shield, he struck true with his sword and beheaded the Gorgon. Athena guided his blade, ensuring the cut was clean. After Perseus's successful return, he gave the severed head to Athena as a thank you gift. Athena attached it to her aegis, either the shield or breastplate she wore, making it even more terrifying to her enemies. From that point on, the Gorgoneion, Medusa's head, became one of Athena's most recognizable symbols. But there's a darker layer to this story. In some accounts, particularly the Roman poet Ovid's version, Medusa wasn't always a Gorgon. She was originally a beautiful mortal woman and a priestess of Athena. Poseidon saw Medusa, desired her, and raped her in Athena's temple. Athena, unable or unwilling to punish her powerful uncle Poseidon, instead punished the victim. She transformed Medusa into a Gorgon, turning her beauty into monstrosity, her hair into snakes, her gaze into a weapon that would ensure no man could ever look at her again. This aspect of the myth troubles modern readers, and it should. It reveals the harsher realities of ancient Greek, thought about power, gender, and justice. But it also adds complicated layers to Perseus's quest and Athena's role in it. When Athena helped Perseus kill Medusa, was she simply helping a hero complete his quest? Or was there also an element of vengeance against someone who had involuntarily become associated with her temple's desecration? The myth doesn't provide clear answers, leaving us with uncomfortable questions about justice and divine punishment. Heracles and his 12 labors Hercules in Roman mythology, was perhaps the greatest of all Greek heroes, strongest, most famous, most celebrated, and throughout his legendary 12 labors, Athena appeared repeatedly to offer guidance and assistance. Heracles' labors were punishments imposed after Hera, who hated Heracles because he was Zeus's illegitimate son, drove him temporarily mad, causing him to kill his own wife and children. To atone for this terrible crime, Heracles had to perform 12 seemingly impossible labors for King Eurystheus. In many of these labors, Athena provided crucial help. During his first labor, killing the Nemean lion, whose hide was impenetrable to weapons, Athena appeared to Heracles and suggested he use the lion's own claws to skin it after strangling it to death. This became the origin of Heracles' famous lion skin cloak. In the 11th labor, Heracles had to steal the golden apples of the Hesperides. The apples were guarded by a dragon and belonged to Hera, making this particularly dangerous. As part of this labor, Heracles had to temporarily hold up the sky while Atlas retrieved the apples. Athena either helped Heracles support the weight or stood ready to help if needed, depending on the version. When Heracles died, poisoned by his wife Deianira, who had been tricked by the centaur Nessus, Athena played a crucial role in his apotheosis, his elevation to godhood. She drove her chariot to Mount Weda, where Heracles' funeral pyre burned, took him up to Olympus, and presented him to Zeus to be made immortal. In various artworks showing Heracles' arrival on Olympus, Athena is almost always present, acting as his sponsor and escort into divinity. The relationship between Athena and Heracles is interesting because they seem like opposite types. Heracles was all about physical strength, direct action, fighting monsters through sheer power. Yet, Athena, the goddess of strategy and intelligence, consistently helped him. This suggests that even Heracles, the ultimate strongman, benefited from wisdom and strategic thinking. His strength was greatest when paired with divine guidance, when tempered by Athena's counsel. Odysseus, Athena's favorite. Of all the heroes Athena aided, Odysseus was special. He was her favorite mortal, the one most like herself in temperament and approach. While Achilles was the mightiest warrior and Heracles the strongest hero, Odysseus was the cleverest, and cleverness was what Athena valued above all else. Throughout Homer's Odyssey, Athena is an almost constant presence. She's guiding Odysseus' journey, protecting him from dangers, inspiring him with ideas, helping his family back in Ithaca, and ultimately ensuring his successful return home. The relationship between Athena and Odysseus is fascinating because it's based on mutual recognition and respect. At one point in the Odyssey, Athena appears to Odysseus in disguise, and he lies to her about his identity. When she reveals herself, she's amused rather than offended. She tells him, essentially, "You are so much like me, always plotting, always devising schemes, never straightforward. I love that about you." She recognizes in Odysseus a kindred spirit, someone who relies on intelligence and cunning rather than just brute force. Athena helps Odysseus in countless ways throughout his journey. She inspires him with ideas when he's stuck. She protects him from Poseidon's wrath, which would otherwise have killed him. She appears to him in dreams to offer guidance. When he finally reaches Ithaca after 10 years of wandering, she disguises him as an old beggar so he can evaluate the situation before revealing himself. When Odysseus must face over 100 suitors who have invaded his house and are trying to marry his wife Penelope, Athena is there. She stands beside him invisibly during the battle, deflecting arrows, inspiring courage, ensuring his victory. After the suitors are dead and Odysseus has reclaimed his home, Athena even prevents a civil war by appearing to the suitors' families and commanding them to accept the outcome and make peace. The Odyssey is, in many ways, a showcase for Athena's protection and guidance of her favorite hero. It demonstrates what a hero can accomplish when he combines natural cleverness with divine wisdom, when intelligence meets opportunity, when a man who thinks like a goddess receives that goddess's active support. Jason and the Argonauts. Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece was another legendary adventure that benefited from Athena's involvement. When Jason needed to build a ship strong enough and large enough to carry his crew of heroes, the Argonauts, across dangerous seas, Athena appeared and helped design the vessel. The resulting ship, named the Argo, was the finest ever built at that time. Athena herself oversaw its construction. She even installed a magical beam in the ship's prow, carved from a sacred oak tree from Zeus's oracle at Dodona. This beam could speak and give prophecies, guiding the Argonauts on their journey. Throughout the voyage, Athena continued to help. When the Argonauts had to pass through the clashing rocks, also called simple gates, two massive rocks that smashed together, crushing anything that tried to pass between them, Athena reached down and pushed the Argo through with her hand, at the crucial moment, ensuring the heroes survived. Athena's help for Jason demonstrates her patronage of not just individual heroism, but also collaborative ventures. The Argonauts weren't a single hero, but a team of heroes working together. Athena supported this kind of organized, coordinated effort, again reflecting her value of strategy and planning over individual glory through combat. Bellerophon and Pegasus. Bellerophon needed to kill the Chimera, a fire-breathing monster with the head of a lion, body of a goat, and tail of a serpent. This seemed impossible until Athena intervened. She gave Bellerophon a golden bridle that would allow him to tame Pegasus, the winged horse born from Medusa's blood, and thus connected to Athena through Perseus's earlier gift of Medusa's head. With Pegasus to ride, Bellerophon could attack the Chimera from above, staying out of range of its flames while striking from the air. Athena's gift turned an impossible fight into a manageable one. Again, her help focused on clever solution. Don't fight the monster on its terms. Change the terms of the fight by gaining air superiority. The pattern of Athena's patronage. Looking across all these examples, we see patterns in how Athena helped heroes. First, she favored intelligence over brute strength. The heroes she most helped, Perseus, Odysseus, Jason, were clever men who thought strategically, while she helped Heracles too. She often advised him on smart approaches, rather than just enabling his strength. Second, she provided equipment and knowledge rather than doing the work for heroes. She gave Perseus a shield and advice, but he had to face Medusa. She guided Odysseus, but he had to actually execute his plans. She helped heroes help themselves, rather than removing challenges entirely. Third, she respected heroes who respected her, those who sought her aid properly, who followed her advice, who showed wisdom and restraint, received her continued support. Those who became too proud or reckless lost her favor. Fourth, she contrasted sharply with Ares' approach to heroes, where Ares inspired mindless battle fury and bloodlust, leading heroes to glorious deaths through reckless courage. Athena taught strategy, careful planning, and smart tactics that let heroes survive their adventures and return home victorious. Athena's role as protector of heroes reveals her at her best, actively engaged with humanity, helping people achieve great things, rewarding intelligence and courage, teaching that wisdom combined with bravery can accomplish the impossible. She wasn't a distant goddess who demanded worship, but offered nothing in return. She was present, helpful, genuinely invested in seeing worthy heroes succeed, and they did succeed again and again, proving that strategic wisdom guided by divine intelligence could overcome any obstacle, defeat any monster, survive any challenge. Athena made heroes greater than they could be alone, and in doing so, she demonstrated the power of wisdom itself. Goddess of craft and wisdom, Arachne and the weaving arts. While Athena's roles as goddess of wisdom and warfare receive the most attention, she was also intimately connected with crafts and skilled labor of all kinds. She represented the transformation of raw materials into useful and beautiful objects through intelligence, skill, and patient work. This aspect of her divine portfolio reveals another dimension of her character and gave her a connection to everyday life that pure warrior or wisdom deities might lack. Athena was particularly associated with weaving and textile arts. In the ancient world, weaving wasn't just a craft, but an essential skill and a major part of the economy. Clothing had to be made by hand. Thread had to be spun from wool or flax. Cloth had to be woven on looms. These weren't trivial tasks, but required significant skill, patience, and artistry. The best weavers could create elaborate patterns, tell stories through their designs, produce cloth of exceptional quality. Weaving also carried symbolic significance, the act of taking individual threads and weaving them into a coherent whole parallel, creating order from chaos, making something beautiful and useful from simple raw materials. The weaver exercised control over the loom, determining the pattern, making countless small decisions that accumulated into the final product. This required planning, visualization, patience, all qualities associated with wisdom. Athena was considered the greatest weaver among gods and mortals. She had invented the loom, or at least perfected it. She taught humans the art of weaving. In Athens, wool working and textile production were considered activities blessed by Athena, and women working at looms were thought to be doing work sacred to the goddess. But Athena's connection to crafts extended beyond weaving. She was associated with pottery, shaping clay into useful vessels. She was connected to metalworking, creating bronze armor, iron tools, gold jewelry. She was linked to carpentry, shipbuilding, and essentially any skilled labor that transformed raw materials into finished products through knowledge and technique. One story in particular illustrates both Athena's mastery of weaving and her fierce pride in her skills, the tale of Arachne. This myth is less heroic adventure and more cautionary tale about hubris and the dangers of challenging the gods. It also reveals a darker, more vengeful side of Athena's character. Arachne was a mortal woman from Lydia in what's now Turkey, renowned throughout the region for her extraordinary weaving skill. People came from far away just to watch her work at her loom, mesmerized by her speed, precision, and artistic vision. The tapestries and textiles she produced were marvels, intricate patterns, vivid colors, scenes depicted with amazing realism. Arachne was proud of her skill, and she had every right to be. She was genuinely exceptional. But her pride went too far. She began to boast that her weaving surpassed even Athena's, that she was the greatest weaver in the world, even greater than the goddess who had invented the craft. Some versions say she even claimed she could teach Athena a thing or two about weaving. This was hubris of the highest order. In Greek thought, hubris meant excessive pride, particularly the kind that made you think you were equal or superior to the gods. It was considered one of the worst character flaws because it invited divine retribution, and Arachne had committed textbook hubris, claiming superiority to a goddess in that goddess's own domain. Word of Arachne's boast reached Athena. The goddess decided to give the mortal a chance to back down. She disguised herself as an old woman and visited Arachne's workshop. Watching the young weaver work, the disguised Athena offered gentle advice. Your skill is exceptional, dear, but be careful about comparing yourself to immortals. Give honor to Athena, acknowledge her as the superior weaver, and I'm sure the goddess will forgive your boastful words. But Arachne, not recognizing Athena in disguise, responded arrogantly. She doubled down on her claims. She said she wasn't afraid of Athena, that her skills spoke for itself, and that if Athena had a problem with her claims, the goddess should appear and prove her supposed superiority in a weaving contest. At this, Athena dropped her disguise, revealing herself in full divine glory. The assembled crowd gasped and fell to their knees. But Arachne, to her credit, or her doom, didn't back down. "Fine," she said. "Let's have the contest. Let's see who the better weaver really is." So, they set up a competition. 2 looms, side by side. Both Athena and Arachne would weave a tapestry, and the quality of their work would speak for itself. Athena began to weave. Her tapestry depicted the contest for Athens, the moment when she and Poseidon competed for patronage of the city. She showed herself presenting the olive tree, majestic and wise, worthy of the honor she received. In the 4 corners of the tapestry, she wove warnings, scenes of mortals who had challenged gods and been punished for their hubris. Each corner showed a different example of divine retribution against human pride. The message was clear: don't challenge the gods. Athena's technique was flawless. Her colors were perfectly blended. Her design was balanced and harmonious. The figures seemed almost alive. So realistic was her skill. It was a masterpiece, the work of divine hands, impossible for any mortal to match. Or so it seemed until Arachne finished her tapestry. Arachne's work was also breathtakingly beautiful, perhaps even more so than Athena's. But where Athena had chosen to show divine majesty and proper religious reverence, Arachne chose a provocative subject. She depicted the loves of the gods, specifically their most scandalous affairs and most questionable behavior. Zeus appeared multiple times in Arachne's tapestry, transformed into various animals to seduce or rape mortal women, as a bull abducting Europa, as a swan with Leda, as a shower of gold with Danae. Poseidon appeared assaulting various women, Apollo pursuing unwilling nymphs. The gods were shown not as majestic divinities worthy of worship, but as sexual predators, as capricious beings whose power made them dangerous rather than honorable. The skill required to weave these scenes was extraordinary. Every detail was perfect. The emotions on the faces, the movement of the bodies, the play of light and shadow, all captured in thread with remarkable artistry. But the subject matter was deeply offensive to divine dignity. Arachne had chosen to use her skill to mock the gods, to expose their worst behaviors, to suggest they were unworthy of the reverence they demanded. Athena examined both tapestries carefully. She looked for any flaw in Arachne's work, any mistake she could point to as proof of mortal inferiority. She found none. The technical quality was perfect. Arachne had woven exactly what she intended, and she'd done it with skill equal to Athena's own. This should have been Arachne's triumph, proof that a mortal could match a goddess in skill. But it was actually her doom. Athena could have perhaps forgiven being equaled if Arachne had used her skill to create something respectful, something that honored the gods. But to use that skill to mock divine behavior, to depict gods as villains and predators, this was unforgivable. In some versions, Athena simply couldn't deny that Arachne's technical skill matched her own, which enraged her. In other versions, it was the insult of the subject matter that pushed her over the edge. Either way, the result was the same. Athena tore Arachne's tapestry to shreds. Then she struck the mortal woman with her shuttle, the tool used in weaving, beating her mercilessly. The goddess's rage was terrifying. Arachne, realizing what she'd done, and unable to bear the punishment and shame, tried to hang herself. But Athena wouldn't allow her even that escape. As Arachne's neck stretched in the noose, Athena transformed her. Arachne's body shrank. Her arms and legs became long and spindly. She sprouted additional limbs. Her body narrowed to almost nothing. She became the first spider. Indeed, the scientific word for spider is arachnid, taking its name from her. And Athena decreed that Arachne and all her descendants would weave forever, but webs, not tapestries. They would spend their lives spinning thread and creating intricate patterns, but always in service of catching prey, never creating beauty for its own sake. The punishment was cruelly perfect. Arachne's skill remained, but it was twisted, reduced, made into something necessary rather than artistic. This story reveals a harsher side of Athena's character. She could be generous and helpful to those who showed proper respect, but she was merciless toward those who challenged her or showed hubris. The punishment seems excessive from a modern perspective. Arachne was proud and disrespectful, certainly. But did that warrant being turned into a spider for eternity? But to the ancient Greeks, the story made perfect sense as a warning about hubris. Don't challenge the gods. Don't think your mortal achievements, however impressive, make you their equal. Show proper reverence and humility. The gods are more powerful than you, and they will punish arrogance. Athena wasn't being cruel. She was enforcing proper cosmic order, teaching a lesson that needed teaching. Beyond the Arachne story, Athena's connection to crafts had broader cultural significance. In Athens, craftspeople of all kinds honored her. Potters, metalworkers, carpenters, shipwrights, all considered themselves under Athena's patronage. There wasn't just religious sentiment, but reflected economic reality. Athens was a trading power, and that required skilled craftspeople to produce goods for export. Pottery, especially, was a major Athenian product, with beautiful painted voices featuring Athena's image exported throughout the Mediterranean. The annual Panathenaic festival included a special offering to Athena, a peplos, a garment, woven specifically for her cult statue in the Parthenon. This wasn't just any cloth, but an enormous, elaborately decorated textile worked on by the city's best weavers. The peplos was embroidered with scenes of the gigantomachy, the battle between gods and giants, in which Athena had played a crucial role. Creating this sacred garment was considered a great honor, and presenting it to Athena during the festival was a central ritual. Athena's patronage of crafts elevated these activities from mere labor to sacred work. Weaving wasn't just making cloth, it was participating in an art form blessed by a goddess. Pottery wasn't just making containers, it was creating beautiful objects worthy of divine approval. Metalworking, carpentry, all skilled trades gained dignity and meaning through association with Athena. This aspect of Athena's character also made her accessible to ordinary people in ways that some other gods weren't. Not everyone could be a hero like Perseus or Odysseus, but many people were craft people, and they could connect with Athena through their work. Every time someone sat at a loom, every time someone threw clay on a potter's wheel, every time someone carefully measured and cut wood for construction, they were engaging with Athena's domain. The goddess of wisdom was also the goddess of skilled hands, of eyes that could see fine details, of minds that could envision what didn't yet exist and then create it through patient work. She represented the marriage of thought and action, of intelligence and craft, of vision and skill that turned ideas into reality. And she punished those who forgot that all human skill, however impressive, was ultimately a gift from the gods and should be used with proper reverence and humility. The virgin goddess, power in independence. One of Athena's most consistent and significant characteristics was her virginity. The epithet Parthenos, virgin, was so closely associated with her that the greatest temple dedicated to her, the Parthenon in Athens, takes its name from this attribute. But Athena's virginity wasn't simply about sexual abstinence, it represented something deeper about her nature, her power, and her independence. Understanding what virginity meant for Athena helps us understand her unique position in the Greek pantheon. In the ancient world, women were generally defined by their relationships to men as daughters, wives, or mothers. Married women came under their husband's authority. Unmarried daughters were under their father's control. Mothers gained status through their sons. Very few women existed independently, defined by their own accomplishments rather than their relationships. But Athena was different. As a virgin goddess who never married, never had children, with one very complicated exception, and never entered into romantic relationships, Athena existed outside the normal categories that defined women's lives. She wasn't anyone's wife, wasn't anyone's mother. She was purely herself, defined by her wisdom, her skills, her strategic prowess, not by any relationship to male authority, except her unusual birth from Zeus, which actually reinforced her independence by skipping the mother figure entirely. This virginity was a form of power. In Greek thought, to be dominated sexually was to be dominated politically and personally as well. Marriage placed women under male authority. Sexual relationships created obligations and dependencies. But Athena, as a virgin, was dominated by no one. She owed nothing to anyone through romantic entanglements. She was complete in herself, autonomous, independent. This was particularly important given her role as a war goddess. She had to be taken seriously in military context, had to command respect from male warriors, had to be seen as a legitimate authority figure in matters of strategy and combat. If she had been involved in romantic relationships, if she had been seen primarily as someone's lover or wife, her authority might have been compromised. But as Parthenos, the virgin, she stood apart, not sexualized, not possessed by anyone, purely defined by her own qualities and accomplishments. There's also a philosophical dimension to Athena's virginity. Wisdom, ideally, should be pure, unclouded by emotion or desire. Athena represented rational thought, strategic intelligence, clear-headed analysis, all things that the Greeks associated with freedom from emotional entanglement. By remaining virgin, by never experiencing romantic love, which the Greeks saw as a form of temporary madness, Athena maintained the purity of wisdom itself. However, there's one myth that complicates this image of Athena as eternally virgin and romantically disinterested. The story of Hephaestus's attempted assault and the birth of Erichthonius. The story goes like this. At some point, Hephaestus, the smith god, became enamored of Athena. Different versions give different reasons for his attraction. Some say Aphrodite cast a spell on him as revenge for some slight. Others say he simply desired her. Hephaestus approached Athena at his forge, supposedly to make new armor for her, but his intentions were sexual. Athena realized what Hephaestus intended and rejected him firmly. But Hephaestus, despite his wisdom in craft, was foolish in matters of desire. He pursued her, caught her, attempted to force himself on her. Athena fought him off. She was a war goddess, after all, and more than capable of defending herself. During the struggle, Hephaestus ejaculated, but his seed fell on Athena's thigh rather than achieving his goal. Disgusted, Athena wiped away the seed with a piece of wool and threw it on the ground. Where it landed, the earth, Gaia, absorbed it and became pregnant. The result was Erichthonius, a child who was part human, part snake, conceived from Hephaestus' seed, but carried by the earth with no involvement from Athena, except as the unwilling catalyst. Athena, despite not being the child's mother in any traditional sense, took responsibility for Erichthonius. She adopted him, raised him, protected him. She placed him in a basket and gave him to the daughters of Cecrops, king of Athens, with strict instructions not to look inside. Of course, curiosity overcame them. They opened the basket, saw the child's serpentine lower body, and went mad or threw themselves off the Acropolis. Accounts vary. Athena recovered Erichthonius and raised him herself. He eventually became a king of Athens and was considered an important figure in the city's early history. He established certain festivals, including some honoring Athena and in gratitude for her care. He instituted practices that honored her as Athens' protector. This myth is complicated and somewhat disturbing. It's an attempted rape story where the victim then raises the resulting child, even though technically the earth was the mother, not Athena. It's hard to know what ancient audiences made of this story, or what it was meant to convey. Perhaps it showed Athena's capacity for compassion even toward a child born from violence done to her. Perhaps it demonstrated her continued virginity. Technically, she wasn't penetrated, didn't conceive, remained Parthenos even after this traumatic encounter. Perhaps it served to explain why Athens had a mysterious, protective serpent deity named Erichthonius, and why Athena was so closely connected to him. Whatever the purpose, the story doesn't really undermine Athena's fundamental virginity or independence. She rejected Hephaestus. She maintained her bodily autonomy despite his assault. The child produced wasn't hers in the biological sense, and she remained unmarried, unattached, defined by herself rather than by relationships. Beyond this troubling myth, Athena's virginity was respected throughout Greek mythology. Unlike Artemis, another virgin goddess who was constantly pursued by would-be lovers in myths, Athena rarely appears in stories focused on a romantic pursuit. It's as if the Greeks understood that Athena's virginity was different from Artemis's, not something that made her a target for conquest, but something that made her fundamentally unsuitable for romantic narrative. This might relate to how the two virgin goddesses were characterized differently. Artemis was associated with wilderness, wild animals, hunting, all things outside civilization, somewhat dangerous and untamed. Her virginity had a wild quality to it, which perhaps made her seem like a challenge to male desire. But Athena was associated with cities, civilization, reason, order. Her virginity was intellectual, rational, almost abstract. She existed in a different category from romantic possibility. The political implications of Athena's virginity were also significant. As the patron goddess of Athens, a city that valued wisdom and culture, having a virgin goddess as patron sent certain messages. The city wasn't subordinate to any other power, as a wife is to a husband in ancient thought. The city was pure, uncorrupted, independent. The city's wisdom was untainted by passion or desire. Athens' identity was its own. not defined by alliances or marriages to other city-states. This image of powerful virginity resonated particularly with certain types of worshippers. Young women about to be married might pray to Athena for wisdom and courage in their new lives, while perhaps also mourning the independence they were losing. Women who worked rather than marrying young, or widows managing their own households, might identify with Athena's autonomous power, and men could respect Athena without the complications that came with goddesses associated with sexuality or romantic love. There's an interesting contrast between Athena and Hera worth noting. Hera was Zeus's wife and queen of the gods, a powerful position, but much of Hera's mythology focuses on her status as wife, particularly her jealousy of Zeus's many affairs and her persecution of his various lovers and illegitimate children. Hera's power was considerable but complicated by her relationship to Zeus. She was powerful as a wife, but also limited by that role, constantly responding to her husband's behavior. Athena had no such limitations. Her power was her own. She answered to Zeus as a daughter to a father, yes, but not as a wife to a husband. She didn't have to manage a relationship, deal with infidelity, or define herself through someone else's choices. She was just Athena, wise, strategic, powerful, complete. Athena's virginity, then, was multifaceted in its meaning. It represented purity of wisdom, independence from male authority, power that owed nothing to sexual relationships, autonomy and self-definition, and a kind of clarity and focus that came from being free of romantic entanglements. It made her unique among goddesses, gave her a particular kind of authority, and allowed her to be taken seriously in domains, warfare, strategy, governance, that might otherwise have been considered exclusively male. The Parthenos wasn't defined by what she didn't do, have sex, but by what she was: complete, independent, wise, powerful, and entirely herself. The temple built in her honor, the Parthenon, stood for over 2,000 years as a monument to this kind of power, this wisdom that needed no one, this strength that stood alone. Athena Parthenos embodied a kind of ideal that transcended gender categories of her time, representing pure intellectual and strategic power, uncomplicated by the usual divine soap opera of romance and desire. Worship, temples, and cultural legacy. To truly understand Athena's importance in ancient Greek culture, we need to look beyond the myths and examine how she was actually worshipped. When temples were built in her honor, what festivals celebrated her, and how her influence shaped not just Athens but all of Greece. Because Athena wasn't just a character in stories, she was a religious reality, a cultural force, a symbol of everything Athens and, to some extent, all of Greece aspired to be. The Parthenon, architectural wonder and sacred space. The Parthenon in Athens stands as the supreme achievement of Greek architecture and the ultimate expression of Athens' devotion to Athena. Built between 447 and 432 BCE, during Athens' golden age under Pericles, the Parthenon wasn't just a temple, but a statement about Athens' power, wealth, cultural sophistication, and religious devotion. The Parthenon sits atop the Acropolis, the rocky outcrop that rises above Athens and has served as the city's sacred center since the Bronze Age. Approaching Athens from any direction, you would see the Parthenon gleaming on top of the Acropolis, its columns and marble surfaces catching the sunlight, dominating the visual landscape. This was intentional. The Parthenon was meant to be seen, to impress, to inspire awe. The temple's design was revolutionary in its perfection. Every line, every measurement, every angle was calculated with mathematical precision to create the perfect visual effect. The columns aren't perfectly vertical, they lean slightly inward, which makes them appear more vertical when viewed from below. The steps aren't perfectly flat. They curve slightly upward in the middle, compensating for the optical illusion that would make them appear to sag if they were actually flat. These refinements throughout the structure demonstrate the Greek pursuit of perfection in honoring their greatest goddess. The Parthenon was decorated with some of the finest sculpture ancient Greece ever produced. The pediments, the triangular spaces at the front and back, showed scenes from Athena's mythology. The west pediment depicted her contest with Poseidon for Athens. The east pediment showed her birth from Zeus's head, with all the Olympian gods present to witness it. These sculptures were painted in vibrant colors, though time has stripped away all the paint, leaving us with white marble that originally was meant to dazzle in red, blue, gold. The frieze that ran around the building showed the Panathenaic procession, the most important religious ritual in Athens' calendar, honoring Athena. The metopes, rectangular panels, showed various mythological battles: Greeks versus Trojans, Greeks versus Amazons, gods versus giants, Lapiths versus centaurs, all representing civilization associated with Athena, defeating barbarism and chaos. Inside the Parthenon stood the Athena Parthenos, the colossal statue created by Phidias. This was the most famous representation of Athena in the ancient world. The statue stood over 38 feet tall and was made using chryselephantine technique: ivory for the flesh, gold for the clothing, and armor all over a wooden frame. Athena stood in full armor, holding a 6-foot-tall statue of Nike, Victory, in her right hand, her left hand resting on her shield. At her feet coiled the serpent Erichthonius. Her helmet was decorated with a sphinx and 2 griffins. The amount of gold used was staggering. About 2,400 pounds of gold plate covered the statue's clothing, armor, and accessories. The gold was designed to be removable. In times of financial crisis, the gold could be melted down and used, then replaced later. This actually happened several times in Athens history. The statue was a work of art, a religious icon, and a treasury all at once. The Parthenon represented the height of Athenian power and culture. It was built with money from the Delian League, an alliance of Greek city-states formed to resist Persian invasion, but increasingly dominated by Athens. Essentially, Athens used alliance funds to build a temple to its patron goddess, demonstrating both its wealth and its cultural sophistication, while subtly asserting dominance over other Greek cities. The Panathenaic festival, the greatest festival honoring Athena, was the Panathenaea, celebrated annually, but with a special Great Panathenaea held every 4 years. This was Athens' most important religious festival, comparable in significance to the Olympic Games. The festival lasted several days and included athletic competitions, musical contests, and religious ceremonies. But the highlight was the procession, a grand parade through Athens, up to the Acropolis and the Parthenon, bringing a new peplos, sacred robe, for Athena's cult statue. This peplos wasn't just any garment, it was woven specially for the festival by a select group of women and girls chosen for the honor. The peplos was embroidered with scenes of the Gigantomachy, the battle between gods and giants, in which Athena had played a crucial role. crushing the giant Enceladus under Sicily and helping the gods achieve victory. On the final day of the festival, this peplos was carried through Athens in an enormous procession that included the entire citizen body: men, women, children, foreigners, slaves, all participating in honoring Athena. The peplos was attached to the mast of a wheeled ship and paraded through the streets before being taken up to the Acropolis and presented to the goddess's statue. The Panathenaic procession is famously depicted in the Parthenon frieze, showing horsemen, chariots, sacrificial animals, musicians, elders carrying olive branches, young women carrying sacred vessels, and the presentation of the peplos itself. This was Athens presenting itself to its patron goddess, demonstrating the city's piety, wealth, organization, and civic pride. The athletic competitions included traditional events: running, wrestling, boxing, chariot racing, plus uniquely Athenian additions, like a race in full armor and team torch relay races. Winners received prize amphorae, specially made pottery vessels filled with olive oil from Athena's sacred olive trees. These amphorae were decorated with an image of Athena Promachos, Athena the champion, on one side, and an image of the event the victor won on the other. These prize amphorae have been found throughout the Mediterranean world, demonstrating the far reach of Athens' cultural influence. Winning at the Panathenaea was prestigious, and the prizes were valuable. A winner might receive dozens of amphorae, each containing about 40 liters of prime olive oil. This wasn't just symbolic. It was economically significant wealth. Beyond these major elements, the Panathenaea included sacrifices of animals to Athena, usually cattle, hymns sung in her praise, dancing, feasting, and general celebration. The entire city essentially shut down for the festival, with everyone participating in honoring the goddess who had given them the olive tree and continued to protect their city. Worship beyond Athens. While Athens was Athena's primary cult center, she was worshipped throughout the Greek world. Almost every Greek city had at least one temple or altar dedicated to Athena. Different places emphasized different aspects of her nature. In Sparta, she was worshipped as Athena Chalcioekis of the Bronze House, in a temple that had bronze-plated walls. Spartans emphasized Athena's warrior aspect, asking for her blessing in their military endeavors. Spartan women dedicated armor to her when their sons or husbands went to war. In Corinth, Athena was associated with the citadel and with the city's prosperity through trade and skilled craftsmanship. Potters and other artisans honored her particularly. In Argos, she was worshipped alongside Hera as a civic protector. In Tegea, her temple held important religious significance for all of Arcadia. Many colonies founded by Greek city-states named themselves after Athena or built major temples to her, spreading her worship across the Mediterranean. This wasn't just religious devotion, but also a way for colonists to maintain connection to their homeland and to claim Athena's protection as they established new settlements in foreign lands. Enduring cultural legacy. Athena's influence extended far beyond her own time and place. The Romans identified her with their goddess Minerva and continued her worship throughout the Roman Empire, though Minerva developed some characteristics of her own distinct from Athena. In the Christian era, many of Athena's temples were converted into churches. The Parthenon itself became a church dedicated to the Virgin Mary, another virgin associated with wisdom and protection. demonstrating interesting continuities between pagan and Christian religious thought. Later still, during Ottoman rule of Greece, the Parthenon became a mosque, and it continued to be a sacred space despite the changes in the religion practiced there. Even after active worship of Athena ceased, her symbolism persisted. During the Renaissance, artists and writers returned to Greek mythology, and Athena appeared frequently as a symbol of wisdom, arts, and just warfare. Paintings, sculptures, poems, countless works referenced Athena or used her iconography. In the modern era, Athena continues to influence culture worldwide. The owl remains a symbol of wisdom, largely because of its ancient association with Athena. Numerous universities, libraries, and educational institutions use Athenian imagery or explicitly invoke Athena as a symbol of learning and knowledge. The Parthenon itself, even in its ruined state, remains one of the most recognizable buildings in the world, and a symbol of classical civilization, democracy, and cultural achievement. Replicas and imitations of the Parthenon have been built around the world, from Nashville, Tennessee to Tokyo, to countless other places. Each represents an attempt to capture some of what the Parthenon symbolized: the pursuit of perfection, the honoring of wisdom, the achievement of beauty through intelligence and skill. Athena appears constantly in modern popular culture. She's a character in novels, movies, video games, and comics. She's invoked in political speeches and philosophical writings. She represents an ideal that continues to resonate: wisdom combined with strength, intelligence paired with courage, civilization triumphant over barbarism, strategic thinking prevailing over brute force. The legacy of Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, virgin protector of Athens, guide of heroes, mistress of crafts, lives on not just in academic study of Greek mythology, but in the ongoing cultural conversation about wisdom, strategy, justice, and the proper use of power. The owl still watches, the olive tree still grows, and the ideals Athena represented, intelligence, skill, strategic thinking, just warfare, cultural achievement, continue to inspire and challenge us thousands of years after her worship faded from the ancient world. Conclusion: the enduring light of wisdom as we emerge from our exploration of Athena's mythology. What emerges is a portrait of perhaps the most complex and multifaceted deity in the Greek pantheon. She was never simple, never one-dimensional. She contained contradictions that the ancient Greeks found not problematic but complementary. She was a virgin who gave birth to nothing yet mothered a serpent child, a warrior who valued strategy over slaughter, powerful yet patient, fierce yet just, born without childhood, yet eternally wise. Athena represented an ideal that transcended her time: the belief that wisdom is power, that intelligence can overcome brute force, that strategic thinking can achieve what raw strength cannot. She stood for the proposition that civilization is better than barbarism, that craftsmanship elevates human existence, that knowledge is worth pursuing for its own sake. She embodied the Greek aspiration toward excellence, arete, the drive to be the best possible version of what you could be. Her birth from Zeus's head set the pattern for everything that followed. She was wisdom made manifest, thought made flesh, strategy personified. She never needed to learn or grow because she emerged complete, carrying within her all the cunning intelligence of her mother Metis, combined with the power of her father Zeus. She was, from the first moment, everything she would ever need to be. Her symbols tell her story: The owl sees what others cannot, perceives truth in darkness, represents knowledge that illuminates. The olive tree grows slowly, but provides bounty for centuries, symbolizing patient wisdom that bears lasting fruit. The aegis protects and terrifies, representing legitimate power wielded for defense of what deserves defending. The armor shows constant readiness, preparedness without aggression. Each symbol reinforces the others, creating a complete image of wisdom, power, preparedness, strategy, civilization. Her relationship with heroes demonstrates her engaged, active nature. She didn't sit aloof on Olympus demanding worship. She appeared to Perseus, giving him the tools to face Medusa. She guided Heracles through impossible labors. She protected Odysseus through decades of danger. She helped Jason and the Argonauts. She wasn't content to be worshipped. She wanted to help, to guide, to enable humans to achieve greatness. And they did, repeatedly, proving that wisdom combined with courage can accomplish the impossible. Her role in the Trojan War reveals her capacity for both loyalty and vengeance. She held a grudge against Paris and Troy for 10 years, working tirelessly to ensure Greek victory. But when the Greeks violated her temple, she turned on them without hesitation. Justice mattered more than previous alliances. Proper conduct mattered more than personal loyalty. She expected the same standards from everyone, and she punished violations, regardless of who committed them. Her virginity represented autonomy, independence, power that owed nothing to anyone else. She was complete in herself, defined by her own qualities rather than by relationships. This made her unique among goddesses and gave her authority in domains that might otherwise have been closed to female deities. She could command warriors, advise kings, guide strategy, because she stood apart from the usual categories that limited women's power. And her legacy, it persists everywhere you look. In the owl symbols on educational institutions worldwide, in the continued use of olive branches to represent peace, in the ruins of the Parthenon, still inspiring awe after 2,500 years, in countless artistic depictions, literary references, philosophical citations, in the very concept of wisdom as a virtue worth cultivating, worth honoring, worth organizing societies around. The ancient Greeks built the Parthenon in her honor, and in doing so they created something that outlasted their civilization, that continued to inspire long after the last worshipper left the temple. That seems fitting for Athena. Her gift to Athens was the olive tree, which provided value for countless generations. The temples and art created in her honor continue to provide value, to inspire, to teach, to remind us of ideals worth pursuing. Athena's story reminds us that wisdom is not weakness, that strategic thinking is more powerful than mindless aggression, that craftsmanship and skill matter, that civilization is worth defending, that justice requires courage, that knowledge is worth pursuing even when immediately useful applications aren't obvious. She reminds us that the best victories come not from overwhelming force, but from clever solutions, not from brute strength, but from understanding and outsmarting challenges. In our own time, facing our own impossible challenges, we could do worse than remember Athena's example. Face problems with wisdom, not just force. Value intelligence, strategy, careful planning. Honor skill and craftsmanship. Protect what deserves protecting with courage informed by thought. Seek justice even when it requires going against previous allies. Remain independent, autonomous, defined by your own accomplishments rather than your relationships. And never stop learning, never stop improving, never stop pursuing excellence. The gray-eyed goddess, born fully armed from Zeus's head, would approve of such an approach. Wisdom never goes out of style. Strategy never becomes obsolete. The values Athena represented, intelligence, skill, strategic thinking, just warfare, cultural achievement, pursuit of excellence, remain as relevant today as they were 2,500 years ago, when Athenians walked in procession up to the Parthenon, bearing a sacred robe woven in her honor. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the mythology of Athena, her miraculous birth, her symbols and attributes, her contest for Athens, her role in the Trojan War, her guidance of heroes, her mastery of crafts, her powerful virginity, and her enduring legacy, please consider subscribing to this channel and liking this video. There are countless more stories from Greek mythology waiting to be explored. Countless more gods and goddesses whose myths reveal timeless truths about human nature. Countless more heroes whose adventures teach lessons that remain relevant across millennia. Until next time, may wisdom guide your path. May strategy inform your decisions, and may you pursue excellence in all your endeavors. The owl of Athena still watches, and wisdom still matters. Keep seeking it, keep valuing it, keep letting it illuminate your way forward through whatever darkness you face. That's what Athena would want. Not worship, but wisdom. Not temples, but thoughtful action. Not sacrifice, but skill and strategy, and the courage to use your mind as well as your strength. The goddess of wisdom and war bids you farewell, until we meet again in the realm of ancient stories and timeless truths.